was an East German Olympic weightlifter. It's mine. And the dad's not known, but this is a newborn. Look at those muscles there. Newborn. 7 months. I mean, so it happens in humans. It's not going to last long in humans unless you're breeding weightlifters. And if we were to breed weightlifters, here's a winner. Anyway, the big issue here is how many of our aches and pains and illnesses and frailties represent simple mutational damage. And we know plenty of cases of that. Muscular dystrophy seems to be a mutation-driven disorder that's got about the same incidence in all populations. It's a great big huge gene, big target, and it's mutation-driven. This is driven by this balanced polymorphism mechanism. How important is each one in trying to understand genetics and our own health and well-being? People have been wondering about that for 100 years, and I don't know there's an answer out there yet. All right. So that was supposed to be a quick summary of ideas and issues and changes, real quick summary in human evolutionary genetics. And now I want to talk a little bit about some of the implications or consequences of these that I think can take more thought than I've given it and most people have. So I'm going to talk about 5 consequences that are worth thinking about. I'm not, I hope you understand, telling you the way things are. I'm telling you interesting hypotheses that are kind of circulating among people in the trade that are worth all of us thinking about. The first one is this. There's a kind of implicit idea, and I notice this in medicine especially, that what is average is what is normal and it's optimal. That the best thing to be is the golden mean, to be the average. And I think this is probably true for species in a stable environment that have had a long time to equilibrate. Horseshoe crabs are older than the mountains around us. I think being an average crab is probably about the best kind of crab to be. But after an environmental change, there's no reason to think that. So, like many of us around my age, were prescribed statins for blood pressure, lipid management. It seemed to be a drug that's generally good for you. So my doctor pointed out to me a few years ago that there had been extensive trials of statins and that a certain dosage will bring you down to normal, but in this big trial in Britain, they'd given some participants overdoses, and their death rate went down. In other words, they brought circulating lipids but way below normal, and these guys survived a lot better. And my doctor was very surprised about this, but it occurred to me, why would we think that normal is best? We're not complete, we're not perfect, we're not an end product. It should be no surprise at all that we can use a drug and do better than what happens to most people. And this mindset that what's average is what's good or what's best, as I say, I don't think it applies to us, I don't think it applies to domestic animals. I think we're in some kind of transient. And I think this way of thinking, I think my doctor shouldn't have been surprised. Of course, I was surprised too, even nothing against him. But thinking about it a little bit, my knee-jerk reaction was, I don't want to go way below normal, but then I think, why not? not well designed, not complete for my diet and lifestyle. We're incompletely adapted, and maybe we're getting more incompletely adapted. I spent a lot of time in the Colorado Desert with bushmen, foraging people, hunter-gatherers who don't have any crops or domestic animals or anything. Horrible way to live. Imagine getting to be, past 20, and there's no aspirin. There's no such thing as toilet paper. Nobody has glasses. There's no hot water. There's no heat. I mean, just awful. Their blood pressure goes down with age. My doctor obsesses about my blood pressure. And it goes up with age. Almost all of our blood pressures will go up with age. That's not normal. I mean, I'll take it over living in the sand, Bushman, but there's nothing, as far as blood pressure goes. I think what we see here is the way humans are designed. I don't think you can do it on a sort of high-starch agricultural product diet, all that, simple carbohydrates, but this is normal. You can, one thing you could do to look for diabetes is you give people what's called a glucose tolerance test. It's sort of like a candy bar, but it's glucose, and then you measure how much glucose gets dumped in the urine. And if you can't cope with that sugar, you dump it in the urine. So you're a so-called chemical diabetic. I don't think this is used much anymore, this glucose challenge. But some pediatricians who worked with us did glucose challenge tests with these bushmen in the Kalahari. Now remember, every couple of years they'll discover a honey tree and get to eat honey. Every couple of years. Other than that, there's nothing sweet in the Kalahari. There's nothing that tastes good. There's nothing that has any value at all, in my opinion, except honey. But they don't get honey. They can go for years without honey. Every single one of them was a chemical diabetic. Every single one of them given glucose and then be in a bottle half an hour later, full of glucose. There wasn't a one of them that could cope with that sudden dose of carbohydrate. They're not diabetic because there's nothing in their diet that would cause difficulties with insulin production. Today, they've got governments, welfare, aid workers, and all of the cornmeal that they can eat, and diabetes is going through them like brush fire. So when we think about what's normal or what's desirable, they're not the same thing. My second point is that evolution can happen in historical time. Again, a stereotype from the past is that evolution is really slow. It takes a long time. It's a slow process. And that is, again, it would never spread among farmers or dog breeders. They know how fast you can make up a new breed. This is an economist, Gregory Clark Davis.
Not I, I'll point out, but those who know me.
Well, he has various costumes. He also does neurobiology. Now, this is Gregory Clark Davis. And you see, an anthropologist could never say this, right? I would deny this and condemn him to for thought crimes. But in fact, he's right. If you look at technologically primitive people. And now, so here's a change in environment, probably an evolutionary change. In Europe in the Middle Ages, and before that in Roman times, there was brutal selection against violence. We have accounts of Roman roads with crosses like phone poles lining the roads and criminals hanging from them. Things got pretty rough. A result is that in Britain, in 800 years, the murder rate, the homicide rate, has declined by a factor of 20. Yes? It's declined by a factor of 20. Tremendous difference. When somebody gets murdered in Salt Lake, it shows up in the paper. If we had homicide rates that they had in Britain 800 years ago, we would have several murders a day in Salt Lake. That's how much the lethal violence has changed. So, if we treat lethal violence, pretend it's a quantitative trait with a threshold, in other words, treat it as a genetic trait, just as a way to get a hold on a metric about it, this corresponds to a change of 0.7 of a standard deviation in propensity to violence. It's like decline, if you want to think about stature, it's like a change of 2 inches in 800 years. And this would be brought about by the most violence-prone 4% of the population failing to reproduce. This is all kind of a thought experiment, but the point is, if we're talking about genes, 800 years is that fast. Very weak selection can change the murder rate by a factor of 20. It can happen fast. There's nothing that says evolution takes a long time. Well, one of the people in the Kalahari Bantu-speaking group are called Herero. They are rich. They have huge herds of beef cattle, which they sell to the European, the EU countries. And they live off milk, mostly. And when I'm there, they know we appreciate fresh milk, and they'll send a kid over in the morning if there's a village nearby with a billy can of fresh milk, and we appreciate it and thank them and all, but we never eat it in front of people. It makes people gag to look at us eating cornflakes with fresh milk. It's as if you were sitting there, chopping on raw liver. It's all right, nothing wrong with raw liver, but I don't really want to watch. And they were that because after very early childhood, they do what every other mammal does. They quit synthesizing an enzyme called lactase that digests milk sugar, which is lactose. So they are lactase deficient in the medical jargon, but in fact, absence of lactase into adulthood is the normal mammal condition. I mean, why would a deer want to be making an enzyme to digest milk? Deer don't eat milk. No mammal does after they're very small. So what that is a gourd full of milk being turned into buttermilk. What that does is ferment the lactose so that people can drink it. If they were to drink raw milk, they could not digest the milk sugar. It would pass into the